Justice Mukul Mudgal, Sri Julka, the Secretary of the Department of INB, Sri Mathur, the Additional Secretary, Sri Singh, the Joint Secretary, Sumit Tandon, and friends. I, of course, in the last few months, with my additional responsibility, have had several occasions to speak on this subject. So some of my views may be repetitive for those who have heard me speak on this subject earlier. The media unquestionably has a very important and a powerful role to play. The role is somewhat evolving. Instead of being an informant, the situation seems to have changed where it's also partly becoming a participant who lays down the agenda. Now, this is a changed role. Whether it's good or bad, I don't think I'm in a position to make a judgment on this. And there are several reasons I analyze for this. The first reason, I believed in the last 1 decade, the definition of the word news has changed. News is today what camera can capture. What camera can't capture is virtually redundant. And that is why a policeman throwing a stone, as Justice Mudgal mentioned, is something which a camera can capture. And therefore, that instantaneously becomes the news. And if you look at conventional media also, the policeman throwing a stone or some singer having made an outlandish tweet found greater billing on Indian media than the results of the British election. So the balance seems to have been somewhat offset, because these were events which took place on the same day, and the priorities therefore keep changing. Now, the impact of the camera was first felt in the print media. And the print media was slightly lost as to what to do in a situation where people for the last 24 hours have been watching the news on television. And therefore, can you report the same news in next day's newspaper? So the print media also got busy reinventing itself. And most stories, instead of being informative, was to analyze what is behind the news. So that's a gradual shift in the print media which has taken place. And now, of course, we are in the initial years of the digital media, which is going to be faster, more instantaneous. Between electronic media and digital media, they've already moved towards the decline, if not death, of magazine journalism, of tabloid journalism, because they are filling up the gap or the void which is necessarily going to be created thereof. And these are what the Secretary just now mentioned, the impact of technology itself. I think the second important impact for this is, and that's a real challenge, the absence of an adequate financial model. What is the financial model behind the digital media? It's still struggling to find one. Between electronic media, the obvious aberration in the electronic media is that the cost of distribution is more than the cost of content. And therefore, cost of distribution being so high, there is an obvious compromise on the cost of content, because the width of the advertising and the quantum of advertising available is almost static or maybe growing marginally. And therefore, this cost of content being compromised with leads again to two important challenges. One is in the battle of eyeballs, you now have to compete. And if you are to compete, depending on what's the priority of a channel, the desire to be watched more is based on the desire to create the hype. And hype can get created by controversies, it can get created by celebrities, it can get created by campaigns, it can get created by important crime events being highlighted, it can get created from cinema to cricket. And therefore, these are all areas where controversies help to create that necessary hype which helps you in the eyeballs. And this necessarily leads to shrillness. Now, in a shrill debate, the other side of the picture is normally not known. And if the epidemic of shrillness spreads, then channel across channel you'll find only one viewpoint. Now, if there is an alternative, legitimate alternative viewpoint, how do you fill in the gap for that? For instance, there are a number of public issues currently being debated where I am choosing not to express myself because I find I am not adequately informed because I only know one side of the picture. Because I have only watched shrill campaigns, and it's only when the shrillness dilutes a little that I'll probably have a space for another viewpoint being expressed. The second important challenge in the absence of a financial model is that whereas some who have, and I'm sure a very large number of them do have this, a proper, adequate ethical base or priorities, will maintain that ethics. The others will start compromising with it. And that is how the whole institution of paid news really has been, has emerged. And in a paid news scenario, particularly during elections and so on, it seemed to be highly prevalent. Now, is there a way we can check it? Is there a way Broadcasting Complaints Council can check it? I have my very serious doubts. I've always wondered on a sideline, Justice Mudgal is here, so I'll take the benefit of his presence. Originally, the concept of news was that news is a part of and an integral part of free speech, which is constitutionally protected. A decade and a half ago, the Supreme Court, in a judgment which I thought it followed the American precedent and ignored earlier Indian precedents, decided that commercial speech is also free speech. So those who market paid news might find this interpretation of the Supreme Court coming to their aid. If the Broadcasting Complaints Council were to proceed against paid news, because that is commercial speech. or commercial free speech. They said it in the context of advertising, but it's obviously the Yellow Pages case. It obviously extends to this principle. And therefore, these are going to be the challenges. But at the end of the day, the secretary mentioned that the content is the king. I think the viewer or the reader is the king. And therefore, he has an option. Today, he is groping in the dark. He has a remote in his hand, he has his smartphone in his hand, and he's trying to dissect various versions of news to find out which is the closest to reality. And therefore, once he decides that this is the channel or this is the site or this is the newspaper where I get more objectivity, it is only then that he starts believing and relying on that. And I think that struggle to find out unadulterated news as distinct from campaign news or as distinct from that struggle is on. At the end of the day, I think in this entire width of the media having ended, it's a good sign, there's nothing wrong in it. There may be an opportunity for the conventionalists to hit, because that reader or viewer who's the king and who's today struggling to find out at least factually what are the correct versions or what are the different events taking place in the world and what is a possible interpretation of that. Once he realizes that that is available on a particular source, then his preference for that source is bound to increase. And I have not the least doubt that the space for that conventional news is again going to emerge, rather than what I always refer to as anchor-driven news or an event which entirely rotates around one or two news events. That space is going to be there. But at the end of the day, I think the great thing about our media world is that we enjoy it. I personally enjoy it. There may be different versions, there may be different extremes. You have the same 20 people on 20 different channels pontificating their views every evening. So there is a space for us to turn over and find out if there is a new face saying something different from the conventional ones each evening. And you can also resort to some serious reading, which is now also available, particularly on the net. It is available on the newspapers. It is available, and I have, in a daily schedule, also found that the mornings are a little more restrained and sober. It's only towards the evening that the mood slightly heats up and the campaigns begin to build up. But overall, there is a space for everyone to watch. Now, what does a university do? I'm glad the Indian Institute of Mass Communication has organized this discussion that you need a university. I think you do, because the universe of media is so large that you'll need trained people getting into it. You'll need people trained in various forms of reporting in various languages. The width is going to increase. Our population is very large. Our viewership is very large. Our target audiences could be different. There could be the Indians living outside India. There could be people of different regional groups. There could be people in the farm sector and various groups. And therefore, you need to train people for this. But then the best training from the journalist always comes when he's on his feet. And therefore, when he's on his feet, either he remains grounded completely and sticks to his kind of reporting and comments, or he gets swayed with the wind. That some people are overtaking him, therefore he has to outbeat them. And that's a training I'm sure no university can probably provide to him. That's a training which he's going to get while he's on his feet, actually reporting events. I'm quite sure that the discussion today will bring various facets of the media world into focus, and probably the need for more structured training before you enter the field will also be discussed. I wish your seminar today a great success.